Mom, my son said, while his pregnant fiancée stood smugly beside him, you have two choices. Either move in with us to help with the baby and household, or sign over your savings so we can hire help instead. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I smiled, walked out, and by sunset, I had signed the papers for Oak Ridge Gardens, the most exclusive senior living community in the state. The look on his face when he realized I'd chosen neither of his options was worth every penny of the entrance fee. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I never imagined I'd celebrate my milestone birthday this way. After 34 years of teaching third graders at Elmwood Elementary, raising a son alone after my husband Richard's early death, and carefully saving for a comfortable retirement, I expected at least a cake and some flowers from my only child. Instead, I received an ultimatum that shattered whatever illusions I still held about my son. That morning, I'd woken at dawn, the way teachers do even years after retirement. The house was quiet, filled with the soft golden light of early spring. I made myself a cup of Earl Grey and stood at the kitchen window watching cardinals flit between the branches of the old maple tree Richard had planted when we first moved. In '65. It felt significant, the age Richard never reached. He died at 49, leaving behind half-finished dreams and a 12-year-old boy who needed his father. I spent the morning preparing a special breakfast, homemade blueberry, waffles with fresh cream, Richard's recipe that Daniel had loved since childhood. The kitchen filled with the comforting scents of vanilla and cinnamon, sunlight streaming through the faded blue curtains I'd sewn myself when we first bought this modest but charming Cape Cod 30 years ago. The dining table was set with the good china, a wedding gift from my mother that had survived 3 decades of careful use. Everything had to be perfect for Daniel's visit. I remember how hard we'd worked for this house. Richard taking extra shifts at the hospital where he worked as a respiratory therapist, me tutoring after school hours and during summer breaks. We'd stretched every dollar, postponed vacations, driven used cars. When Richard died suddenly of an aneurysm, leaving me with a grieving child and a half-paid mortgage, I somehow managed to keep it all together. I took on weekend administrative work at the school, budgeted meticulously, and learned to fix things around the house myself, skills I'd never imagined needing. I never remarried. There were opportunities. A fellow teacher, a parent of one of my students who'd lost his wife, even my neighbor Alan who still brings over his extra tomatoes each summer. But I'd pour my heart and energy into Daniel's future instead. College funds took priority over new furniture. His sports equipment came before my wardrobe. His needs always came first. He has Richard's eyes, friends would say, and I'd beam with pride seeing my husband's gentle intelligence in our son's face. Daniel had been a bright child, curious, affectionate, always bringing me wildflowers he'd picked from the yard. For the prettiest teacher in school, he'd say, even though I was just his mom. I still kept pressed flowers from those days in my journal, dried memories of a boy who once thought I hung the moon. His high school years were typical. Some rebellion, the occasional poor grade, but nothing concerning. He still hugged me goodnight, still asked about my day. We had our Sunday morning pancake ritual, our summer camping trips to Lake Wisteria. We were a team, he and I, navigating life without Richard, but finding our way. When did that boy disappear? Perhaps it was during his years at State University, when his visits home became shorter and less frequent. Phone calls dwindled to texts, then to belated replies. Or maybe it was after he moved to the city and started at Meridian Financial, surrounded by people who measured success in square footage and car models. Most likely, though, it was when he met Veronica 3 years ago, a woman who looked at our family photos with thinly veiled contempt. So quaint, she'd say about my home, my teaching awards, my garden. That tone making it clear she meant the opposite. Tall, polished, with acrylic nails that clicked impatiently against her phone screen whenever conversation turned to anything but their plans, their careers, their future. I tried. God knows I tried. I invited them for dinners, cooking Daniel's favorites that Veronica would barely touch. "I'm gluten-free this month," she'd say, though I'd seen her eat bread the week before. I sent thoughtful gifts, carefully chosen, books and handmade scarves that never appeared in their photos. I asked about their lives with genuine interest, remembering details about Veronica's job promotion or Daniel's work projects, while they forgot which grade I had taught or that today was my birthday. But Veronica would check her expensive watch. Throughout our conversations, and Daniel would grow increasingly impatient with my old-fashioned ways, whether it was my preference for handwritten thank you notes or my concerns about their mounting credit card debt. "Mom, nobody does things that way anymore," he'd say, as if my values had expiration dates. The distance between us grew, stretching from silence into absence. Christmas cards became text messages, Sunday calls became monthly, then quarterly. Last Christmas, they didn't even call. I sat alone at my table with 2 carefully wrapped presents that remained under the tree until New Year's, when I finally donated them to charity: a leather portfolio for him, a cashmere scarf for her. So when Daniel called a week before my birthday, saying they had a surprise planned, hope bloomed in my chest like one of Richard's prized roses. His voice had that old warmth, that hint of excitement I remembered from when he was young. "Don't make any plans, Mom. We want to take you somewhere special." Maybe they had finally realized what they'd been missing. Maybe we could rebuild what was lost. How foolish I was to believe that some bonds couldn't be broken. How naive to think my son still saw me as someone worthy of celebration rather than a resource to be used. The morning of my 65th birthday dawned clear and bright, the kind of perfect spring day that usually lifted my spirits. I'd spent the previous evening preparing my special birthday dinner: herb-roasted chicken with rosemary potatoes and a lemon tart for dessert, Richard's favorite meal that had become my birthday tradition. The table was set with care: my grandmother's lace tablecloth, the good silver polished to a gleam, cut flowers from my garden arranged in the crystal vase Daniel had given me for Mother's Day years ago. I'd taken extra care with my appearance. 2, a new dress in periwinkle blue that brought out my eyes, my silver hair freshly trimmed, a touch of the perfume Richard had always loved. Foolish vanity, perhaps, but I wanted Daniel to see that his mother was still vibrant, still had dignity and grace. I wanted him to be proud of me. The day stretched on with no word from Daniel. I called mid-morning, but the call went straight to voicemail. "Hi, honey. Just wondering what time you'll be arriving. Dinner will be ready whenever you get here. Love you." I kept my voice light, hiding the worry that was already beginning to gnaw at me. By 3 o'clock, the house was spotless. The food prepped and still no call. I tried again. No answer. I sent a text. No response. The hours ticked by with excruciating slowness as hope gradually gave way to a familiar disappointment. At 6:30, just as I was accepting that he wasn't coming, headlights swept across the living room curtains. The sudden jump in my heart, that reflexive maternal joy at his arrival, made the events that followed even more painful. I opened the front door, smile already in place, only to freeze at the sight before me. Daniel stood there, not with flowers or a gift, but with Veronica beside him, her hand resting pointedly on a very visible baby bump I hadn't known existed. Neither of them smiled. Instead, Daniel looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot, while Veronica surveyed me with cool assessment. "Happy birthday, Mom," Daniel said, the words hollow and rehearsed. No hug, no kiss on the cheek. He stepped past me into the house, Veronica following with a slight grimace as she took in my humble decor. "You've redecorated," she observed, though nothing had changed since her last visit 8 months ago. "No, everything's the same," I replied. closing the door behind them. "I didn't know you were expecting. Congratulations to you both." The words tasted like ash in my mouth, not because I wasn't happy about a grandchild, but because they hadn't even bothered to tell me. 4 months along, Veronica said, one manicured hand still protectively on her belly. "Would have told you sooner, but Daniel said you've been so busy with your retirement activities." A blatant lie. I'd been anything but busy, and Daniel knew it. In the dining room, they barely glanced at the carefully set table, the waiting meal. Daniel went straight to the living room sofa, Veronica perching beside him like a bird of prey. "Aren't you going to offer us something to drink?" she asked. "Sparkling water for me, obviously." The slight emphasis on obviously stung, as if I might foolishly offer alcohol to a pregnant woman. I brought their drinks, my hands trembling slightly. Something was wrong. The tension in the air was palpable, like the heaviness before a storm. "So, what's this surprise you mentioned?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady as I sat across from them. Daniel cleared his throat, not meeting my eyes. "Mom, we need to talk about the future. Your future, specifically." "My future?" I repeated, confused. "Yes," Veronica interjected, her voice brisk and businesslike. "Daniel and I have been discussing what happens after the baby comes. We're both incredibly busy with our careers, and childcare in the city is astronomically expensive." Daniel nodded. "The thing is, Mom, we've been looking at our finances, and with the baby coming, the mortgage on our condo, and Veronica's maternity leave, things are going to be tight." I nodded slowly, a cold sensation spreading through my chest. "I understand. Do you need a loan? I don't have much, but—" "Not a loan," Veronica cut in, her tone making it clear what she thought of my modest savings. "We've come up with 2 options that would work for everyone." Daniel finally looked at me, his expression a strange mixture of entitlement and discomfort. "Option 1. You sell this house and move in with us. You can help with the baby, cooking, housework. It would save us thousands in childcare and give you quality time with your grandchild." "Or option 2, Veronica continued before I could respond. "You stay here but liquidate your retirement fund to help us hire a full-time nanny and housekeeper." She said this as if she were offering me a generous choice, her head tilted in what she probably thought was a sympathetic expression. The silence that followed seemed to stretch for an eternity. I looked at my son, this stranger wearing Daniel's face, and tried to find any trace of the boy I had raised, the boy who once made me hand-painted Mother's Day cards declaring me the best mom in the universe. "Let me make sure I understand," I said finally, my voice remarkably calm considering the earthquake happening inside me. "Either I give up my home to become your live-in, unpaid nanny and housekeeper, or I empty my retirement savings to pay for someone else to do that job." Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, don't be dramatic. We're talking about family helping." "Family? Dad would have wanted—" "Don't!" The word came out sharp enough to cut. "Don't you dare tell me what your father would have wanted." "Mrs. Calloway," Veronica said with exaggerated patience, "we're simply being practical. This house is too big for one person anyway, and your retirement fund is just sitting there while we're struggling with real-world expenses." "Real-world expenses," I repeated. "Like your trip to Bali last summer? Or the luxury SUV in my driveway that still has the dealer tags on it?" Daniel flushed. "That's not fair. We work hard for what we have." "And I didn't?" The question hung in the air between us. Veronica sighed dramatically. "Daniel said you might be difficult about this. Look, we're not asking for charity. We're offering you a chance to be part of your grandchild's life. Some gratitude would be appropriate." Something snapped inside me then, not with a dramatic crash, but with the quiet finality of a thread that had been stretched too thin for too long. 34 years of teaching had taught me to recognize bullying in all its forms, and this calculated manipulation, this emotional extortion, was nothing but adult bullying dressed up as family helping family. I stood up slowly, smoothing my new dress with hands that no longer trembled. Dinner is ready. Why don't we discuss this after we eat? They exchanged surprised glances, clearly expecting more resistance. Daniel looked relieved. Conflict avoidance had always been his way. Veronica seemed suspicious but followed him to the dining table. The meal passed in strained conversation. They talked about their jobs, their friends, their plans for the nursery, a complete renovation of their guest room with custom wallpaper and imported furniture. Not once did they ask about my life, my health, my happiness. Not once did they acknowledge that today was supposed to be my celebration. As I served the lemon tart, delicately browned meringue peaks atop tangy curd, a recipe that had taken me years to perfect, Veronica pushed her plate away. No dessert for me. I'm watching my pregnancy weight. Daniel took a perfunctory bite, then set down his fork. So, Mom, about those options. We need to know your decision before we leave tonight. The contractor for the nursery needs a deposit by Monday, and if we're going with option 2, we'd need your contribution right away. I looked at my son across the table, at the impatient tapping of his fingers, the entitled expectation in his eyes. In that moment, with perfect clarity, I saw what I had failed to see for years: the slow, insidious erosion of respect, the quiet death of gratitude. I saw a man who viewed his mother's life savings not as the result of decades of sacrifice and careful planning, but as a resource he was entitled to claim. And I knew, with bone-deep certainty, that if I gave in now, if I handed over my home or my savings, there would be no end to what they would take from me. Next would come my time, my energy, my health, and finally, any shred of self-respect I had left. I have a third option, I said quietly, rising from the table to retrieve my phone. I opened the photo gallery and turned the screen toward them. Oak Ridge Gardens. I toured it last month, just out of curiosity. They stared at the images of the upscale senior living community with its elegant apartments, manicured grounds, and resort-style amenities. I don't understand, Daniel said slowly. It's quite simple. I choose neither of your options. Instead, I'll be selling this house and moving to Oak Ridge Gardens. They have a lovely one-bedroom unit available immediately with full services and care options for the future. Veronica's face contorted with disbelief. You can't be serious. That place must cost a fortune. It does, I agreed. Almost exactly the amount you were planning to take from me. Daniel's face darkened. So you'd rather spend your money on some fancy retirement home than help your own son? Your own grandchild? The hurt in his voice might have swayed me once, but I was seeing clearly now. What I'd rather do is ensure that I won't be a burden to anyone in my old age, especially not to a son who sees me as an ATM or a convenience. This is ridiculous, Veronica snapped. You're being selfish and petty over a simple request for family support. I looked at her, then at my son, and felt an overwhelming wave of sadness. Not for myself, but for them. For what they would never understand about love, about respect, about the difference between giving freely and having something taken from you. You need to leave now, I said softly. I have some calls to make. They left in a storm of accusations and slammed doors, the new SUV spraying gravel as it sped away from my driveway. I stood in the doorway, watching the taillights disappear. Down the street and waited for the tears to come. They didn't. Instead, for the first time in years, I felt something unexpected. Relief. After Daniel and Veronica left, the house fell into a silence so profound I could hear the old grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, a steady heartbeat counting the seconds of my new reality. I moved through the rooms like a ghost, mechanically clearing the table, wrapping the barely touched food, washing dishes that gleamed with the oil of fingerprints that no longer felt like family. I should have been devastated. I should have collapsed into tears, called my sister in Arizona, or at least poured myself a larger-than-usual glass of wine. That's what the old Eleanor would have done. The Eleanor who had spent decades trying to fill the hole Daniel's increasing absence had left in her heart. Instead, I found myself standing in front of the hallway mirror, studying my reflection with new eyes. The woman who gazed back at me wasn't broken. She looked tired. Yes, there were new lines around her mouth, a certain heaviness in her shoulders, but her eyes were clear, steady, almost serene. You knew this was coming, I told my reflection. Some part of you has known for years. And it was true. The signs had been there in 100 small dismissals, 1,000 tiny erosions of respect. The Christmas presents left unopened. The graduation ceremony where he'd asked me to sit in the back so his roommate's family could have the front row seats. The time he'd forgotten to include me in his engagement dinner, then acted surprised that I was hurt. It was just immediate. "Family, Mom," he'd said, as if I were some distant relative rather than the woman who had raised him single-handedly. I moved to the living room and sat in Richard's old leather chair, the one I usually avoided because it made Daniel uncomfortable, to see me in his father's place. My fingertips traced the worn armrests where Richard's hands had once rested. What would he have thought of the man his son had become? What would he have advised me to do? "You always said we were raising him to be independent," I whispered to the empty room. "But I don't think this is what you meant." The mantel clock chimed 10. My birthday was almost over, and it had indeed brought a kind of rebirth, though not the one I'd expected. In the quiet of my living room, surrounded by photos and mementos of a life dedicated to others, I made a decision that wasn't rash or emotional, but arrived with the calm certainty of something long overdue. I would no longer set myself on fire to keep Daniel warm. I reached for my laptop and opened the folder marked Retirement Options. I had been researching senior living communities for months, not because I felt old or infirm, but because the emptiness of this house had started to echo too loudly. I had bookmarked several places, most of them modest and practical, the kind of sensible choices a retired teacher on a fixed income would make. But tonight, I clicked on Oak Ridge Gardens, the luxury community I had toured on a whim after a former colleague moved there. At the time, I had dismissed it as too extravagant, too self-indulgent for someone like me who had spent a lifetime being careful with money. Now, I scrolled through images of the elegant apartments, the manicured gardens, the art studio, and library that had made my heart skip when I first saw them. My finger hovered over the Request Information button. Was I really considering this? Could I actually walk away from the house where Richard and I had built our life? Where Daniel had taken his first steps? Where decades of memories lined the walls and filled the drawers? The cursor blinked, patient and non-judgmental. In its rhythmic appearance and disappearance, I saw the pulse of a question. If not now, when? I clicked the button. Then I did something I'd never done before. I opened my financial portfolio, the careful nest egg I'd built through decades of modest teacher salaries, prudent investments guided by Richard's old college friend who managed my accounts, and the life insurance policy that had seen me through the lean years after Richard's death. There it was in black and white. Enough. Not wealthy by Daniel's standards, certainly, but enough to secure my future, to ensure that I would never have to choose between medication and groceries. Enough that, if managed carefully, I could live comfortably at Oak Ridge Gardens for years to come. All this time, I had been viewing this money as a safety net for Daniel, as something to pass on, as a resource that wasn't really mine to use. Looking at the figures now, I understood with startling clarity. This wasn't just money. It was the physical manifestation of my life's work, my choices, my sacrifices, my right to security and dignity in my final chapter. The house phone rang, startling me. The caller ID showed Daniel's number. My hand moved toward the receiver, then stopped. What more was there to say tonight? What words could possibly bridge the chasm that had opened between us? I let it ring until the answering machine picked up. Daniel's voice filled the room, tense and controlled. "Mom, I think you misunderstood our intentions. We're not trying to take advantage of you. We're trying to create a family solution that benefits everyone. Call me back so we can discuss this reasonably." Reasonably, as if his proposal had been reasonable, as if my response had been irrational. The machine beeped, recording his sigh. "Look, if you're still upset about the birthday thing, I'm sorry. We should have acknowledged it, but this is bigger than a birthday. This is about the future of our family. Just call me back." The machine clicked off. I didn't move to return the call. Instead, I walked through the house, room by room, seeing it with new eyes, not as the shrine to the past I had preserved, but as an asset that could fund my future. This dining room where we had celebrated Christmases and Thanksgivings, where Daniel had struggled through algebra homework, where Richard and I had stayed up late planning dream vacations we never took. It was just a room now. The walls wouldn't miss me. The floors wouldn't weep when I was gone. In the spare bedroom that had once been Daniel's, I ran my hand over the blue quilt that still covered the bed. I had kept it ready all these years, freshly laundered, waiting for visits that grew increasingly rare. The closet still held a few of his old things: high school sports trophies, science fair ribbons, a box of comic books he'd outgrown but couldn't bear to throw away. I opened the closet and breathed in the lingering scent of mothballs and old paper. Then I closed it firmly. Tomorrow, I would start sorting through these things, deciding what to keep, what to donate, what to offer Daniel one last time before I let it all go. In my bedroom, I opened the jewelry box on my dresser. My mother's. Pearls, my grandmother's cameo, the sapphire earrings Richard had given me on our 10th anniversary. Small treasures, not valuable in any way Daniel or Veronica would appreciate, but precious to me for the memories they contained. I fastened the pearls around my neck, watching in the mirror as they gleamed softly against my skin. "You are allowed to keep what matters to you," I told my reflection. "You are allowed to decide what happens next." The phone rang again. This time, Veronica's number. I let it go to voicemail. Eleanor. Her voice was honey-sweet, a tone I had never heard her use with me before. "I think we got off on the wrong foot tonight. Daniel and I truly value your wisdom and experience, which is why we want you involved in the baby's life. Think of it as an investment in your legacy. We can talk more about the financial details. Find a compromise that works for everyone. Call us back, please. Legacy, investment, compromise." The corporate language of negotiation applied to what should have been a relationship of love and respect. I didn't call back. Instead, I sat at my small writing desk and began to make lists. Practical, action-oriented lists that would guide the coming days and weeks. Contact real estate agent. Schedule meeting with financial advisor. Tour Oak Ridge Gardens again. Begin sorting household items. The simple act of putting pen to paper made it real. This wasn't just an emotional reaction to a painful evening. This was a plan, a path forward that had been waiting for me to find the courage to take the first step. Around midnight, my cell phone chimed with a text from Daniel. "Mom, please be reasonable. We need to talk about this like adults." I typed back a response, not in anger, not in hurt, but with the serene clarity that had settled over me like a mantle. "I am being reasonable. I am making adult decisions about my own life and resources. We can talk further when you're ready to respect those decisions. Good night, Daniel." Then I silenced my phone, pulled back the covers of my bed, and lay down. Outside my window, the waning moon cast silver light across my garden, the rose bushes Richard had planted, the hydrangeas that bloomed blue in summer, the old maple that had shaded Daniel's childhood play. Tomorrow, I would call Oak Ridge Gardens. I would contact Madeline. Walsh, the formidable real estate agent who had helped 3 of my colleagues downsize after retirement. I would begin the process of dismantling this life to build a new one. But tonight, in the gentle darkness of the bedroom I had once shared with Richard, I simply breathed. In and out, steady and sure. The weight I had carried for so long, the desperate hope that Daniel would return to being the son I remembered, the fear that I would end up alone, the guilt that somehow I had failed as a mother, began to dissolve with each breath. For the first time in years, I fell asleep without waiting for the sound of a phone call that never came, without leaving the porch light on for a visitor who never arrived. I slept the dreamless sleep of someone who has set down a heavy burden and discovered they can walk unburdened into a new dawn. In the quiet of that night, without fanfare or declaration, the decision was made. Not just to move to Oak Ridge Gardens, not just to protect my finances, but to reclaim my right to write the final chapters of my own story. Eleanor Calloway, teacher, widow, mother, was going to become Eleanor Calloway, author of her own life. Morning. Arrived with gentle persistence, sunlight filtering through my bedroom curtains and birdsong replacing the night's silence. For a moment, I lay still, wondering if the previous day's events had been a bad dream. Then reality settled in, not with the crushing weight I might have expected, but with a strange, almost buoyant clarity. Today would be the first day of my new life. I rose earlier than usual, made a cup of strong coffee, and sat at the kitchen table with my notebook. The lists I'd made the night before stared back at me, no longer theoretical, but demanding action. First on the list, call Oak Ridge Gardens. My hand trembled slightly as I dialed the number. Was I really doing this? Was I truly prepared to upend everything familiar for an uncertain future? Oak Ridge Gardens, this is Patricia speaking. How may I help you? The warm, professional voice on the other end anchored me. Hello, this is Eleanor Calloway. I toured your facility about a month ago with Diane Mercer, and I'd like to discuss residence options. Of course, Mrs. Calloway. We remember you. Ms. Mercer mentioned you might be calling. Would you like to schedule another tour, or are you interested in beginning the application process? The question hung in the air between us. Tour or application? Consideration or commitment? Application, I said firmly. I'd like to move forward as soon as possible. Wonderful. We currently have 3 units available that might suit your needs. There's a garden-level 1-bedroom, a second-floor 1-bedroom with a study nook, and a corner 2-bedroom on the 3rd floor with a lovely view of the lake. All come with full access to our amenities, of course. I thought of Daniel's and Veronica's faces when I'd shown them the photos of Oak Ridge Gardens, the disbelief, the calculation, the dawning realization that I was serious. The corner 2-bedroom, please. I'd like to see it today, if possible. Patricia sounded pleased. We can certainly arrange that. Would 11 o'clock work for you? I'll have our residency coordinator, Marcus, prepare all the necessary paperwork, so you can review it during your visit. Perfect. Thank you, Patricia. After hanging up, I sat motionless for a moment, absorbing what I had just done. Not merely inquired, not just explored options, but set concrete wheels in motion. The decision made in the quiet of night was now taking tangible form in the light of day. My phone buzzed with an incoming text from Daniel. Mom, we need to talk. This silent treatment is childish. Childish. The word stung, not because it was true, but because it revealed how thoroughly he misunderstood what was happening. This wasn't a tantrum or a negotiating tactic. This was a seismic shift in our relationship, one he hadn't yet recognized. I typed back, I'm not being silent to punish you. I'm taking time to make important decisions. I have an appointment this morning, but we can talk this evening. His response came immediately. What kind of appointment? Are you okay? The hint of concern would have once warmed my heart, made me eager to reassure him. Now I recognized it for what it was, concern about his plans, his inheritance, his control over my choices. I'm fine. just handling some personal business. I'll call you around 7. Next on my list was Madeline Walsh, the real estate agent known for her no-nonsense approach and her expertise in helping seniors transition to new living situations. Her office answered on the second ring. Madeline Walsh's office. How may I direct your call? This is Eleanor Calloway. I'd like to speak with Madeline about listing my home. One moment, please. While on hold, I gazed around my kitchen, the faded yellow walls I'd painted myself 15 years ago, the collection of hand-thrown pottery mugs from the local artisan market, the refrigerator still dotted with Daniel's childhood artwork held up by fruit-shaped magnets. How quickly a home could transform from sanctuary to burden when viewed through the lens of the future rather than the past. Eleanor, it's been ages. Helen mentioned you might be calling. Thinking of downsizing? Madeline's brisk voice held no judgment, only practical energy. More than downsizing, Madeline. I'm looking at moving to Oak Ridge Gardens. A brief pause. Good for you. That's a lovely community. When are you thinking of listing? As soon as possible. I'm viewing a unit there today, and if all goes well, I'd like to move forward immediately. Well, you're in luck. The market in your neighborhood is hot right now. Lots of young families looking for established homes with character. We can schedule a walkthrough tomorrow if you like, get some photos, and have your listing ready by the weekend. The efficiency was both startling and reassuring. That would be perfect. Would 10 a.m. tomorrow work? I'll be there with my photographer. And Eleanor? Bring a friend if you can. These transitions can be emotional, and it helps to have support. After finishing with Madeline, I called my sister, Jean, in Arizona. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice thick with sleep despite the time difference. Ellie? Is everything okay? You never call this early. I hesitated, suddenly unsure how to explain the seismic shift that had occurred. I'm selling the house and moving to Oak Ridge Gardens, I said finally, the words still strange in my mouth. What? Why? Did something happen with Daniel? Jean had always seen through the polite fiction I maintained about my relationship with my son. You could say that. I explained the birthday dinner, the ultimatum, my decision. Jean was quiet for a long moment. Then she exhaled sharply. Well, it's about damn time. What? Ellie, I've been watching you twist yourself into knots trying to maintain this relationship with Daniel for years. That boy has been taking advantage of your guilt and your love since Richard died. I'm only sorry it took something this extreme to make you see it. Her bluntness was both painful and liberating. For so long, I had defended Daniel to everyone, to Jean, to my friends, to myself. I had made excuses for his absences, rationalized his dismissals, minimized his thinly veiled contempt. Hearing Jean name it so plainly made it impossible to continue the pretense. I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, I admitted. The right thing for whom? For Daniel? No, probably not. For you? Absolutely. You're 65, Ellie. If not now, when exactly are you going to start putting yourself first? When indeed. After promising to keep Jean updated, I hung up and moved. To the next item on my list. Contact financial advisor. I dialed Howard Brenner's office, prepared for the usual wait to speak with him directly. To my surprise, his secretary put me through immediately. Eleanor, good to hear from you. Just checking in, or is there something specific on your mind today? Howard had managed my modest portfolio for years, always treating me with the same respect he showed his wealthier clients. Something specific, Howard. I'm making some significant changes. I'm selling the house and moving to Oak Ridge Gardens. Unlike Jean, Howard showed no surprise. I see. Well, that's certainly doable from a financial perspective. Your portfolio is in excellent shape, and the proceeds from your home sale should provide additional cushion. Would you like to schedule a time to review your options in detail? Yes, but there's something else. I took a deep breath. I need to make sure my assets are protected. I want to establish a living trust that ensures my money goes to my care and well-being, with specific provisions for what happens after I'm gone. There was a slight pause. May I ask what's prompted this concern about asset protection? I explained briefly about Daniel's demands and my concerns that he might try to challenge my decisions or pressure me further. Howard's voice took on a steely quality I'd never heard before. I understand completely, Eleanor. Unfortunately, this isn't uncommon in my practice. We can absolutely set up protections that will ensure your wishes are respected. I have an opening this afternoon at 2. Would that work? By 10 a.m., I had made 3 life-changing phone calls, each one cementing my resolve. I showered and dressed with unusual care, choosing a tailored blue pantsuit I usually reserved for special occasions, adding my mother's pearls, and applying makeup with a steady hand. The woman in the mirror looked strong, determined, elegant. Someone making choices rather than accepting fate. As I prepared to leave for Oak Ridge Gardens, my phone rang again. Daniel. I let it go to voicemail, then listened as I gathered my purse and keys. Mom, I don't know what's gotten into you, but this silent treatment is really disappointing.
Veronica is upset, which isn't good for the baby. We were just trying to come up with a solution that works for everyone. I don't understand why you're being so difficult. Call me back so we can fix this. Fix this. As if the problem were a misunderstanding,
rather than a fundamental breach of respect. As if I were a malfunctioning appliance, rather than a person whose boundaries had been violated. I deleted the message and walked out to my car, a sensible sedan that had served me reliably for 8 years. As I backed out of the driveway, I glanced at the house, the home that had sheltered my hopes, dreams, and disappointments for 3 decades. For the first time, I saw it not with the eyes of memory, but with the eyes of possibility. What would it mean to someone new? A young family, perhaps. Children racing through the rooms that had grown so quiet. New dreams taking root where mine had withered. The drive to Oak Ridge Gardens took 20 minutes, carrying me from my modest suburban neighborhood to the landscaped grounds of what might soon be my new home. The security guard at the entrance recognized me from my previous visit and waved me through with a friendly smile. In the elegant lobby, Marcus Wells, the residency coordinator, greeted me warmly. Mrs. Calloway, welcome back to Oak Ridge Gardens. We're delighted you're considering joining our community. Thank you, Marcus. I'm looking forward to seeing the corner unit. Of course. Before we head up, would you like to review some of the paperwork? Understanding the financial commitment is an important part of the decision-making process. I smiled, appreciating his professional approach. Actually, I've already made my decision. I'd like to see the unit, and if it meets my needs, I'm prepared to make a deposit today. Surprise flickered across his face, quickly replaced by pleased professionalism. Wonderful! In that case, let's head straight up to the 3rd floor. The unit was just refreshed with new paint and carpeting last month, so it's move-in ready. The elevator ascended smoothly, carrying me not just to a higher floor but toward a future I had barely allowed myself to imagine 24 hours ago. With each passing floor, I felt lighter, as if the weight of expectations and disappointments was being left behind. When Marcus opened the door to Unit 312, I knew immediately that I had made the right decision. Sunlight streamed through large windows, illuminating a spacious living area that opened onto a private balcony. The kitchen was compact but modern, with granite countertops and high-end appliances. The master bedroom easily accommodated a queen-sized bed and sitting area, while the second bedroom would make a perfect office or guest room for Jean when she visited. The view is our most requested feature, Marcus said, leading me to the balcony. Below stretched the community's landscaped grounds, centered around a small lake where residents were already enjoying morning walks. In the distance, the city skyline provided a dramatic backdrop. It's perfect, I said simply. Back in his office, I reviewed the paperwork with careful attention. The financial commitment was significant, a substantial entrance fee plus monthly maintenance costs, but well within my means, especially once the house sold. I signed the necessary forms, wrote a check for the deposit, and scheduled a move-in date just 3 weeks away. "Congratulations, Mrs. Calloway," Marcus said, handing me a welcome folder and a set of keys. "We're thrilled to have you joining our community." As I walked back to my car, keys in hand, I felt a curious mixture of emotions: trepidation, yes, but also exhilaration, pride, and a surprising sense of peace. In the space of one morning, I had set in motion changes that would alter the course of my remaining years. My phone buzzed with texts from Daniel, increasingly urgent. "Mom, please call me back." "Are you okay?" "What appointment? Is something wrong?" "Mom, you're worrying me." Instead of responding to Daniel, I called Jean. "It's done," I said when she answered. "I've put a deposit on a beautiful 2-bedroom unit at Oak Ridge Gardens. The real estate agent is coming tomorrow to list the house. I'm meeting with my financial advisor this afternoon to set up a living trust." "My God, Ellie." Jean sounded both impressed and slightly concerned. "You're not wasting any time." "I've wasted too much time already," I replied, surprised by the strength in my own voice. 30 years of putting everyone else first. It stops now. "What about Daniel? Have you told him?" "Not yet. We're supposed to talk this evening." I paused, the weight of what lay ahead momentarily dampening my resolve. "It won't be easy." "No," Jean agreed. "It won't. But you'll get through it. And Ellie, I'm proud of you." Those simple words, "I'm proud of you," lingered as I drove to a small cafe for lunch before my meeting with Howard. When was the last time anyone had been proud of me? When was the last time I had been proud of myself? As I sipped a cup of tea and picked at a sandwich, I realized that today, for the first time in years, I felt something like pride. Not in being a good mother, not in being self-sacrificing, but in standing up for my own worth. In taking decisive action rather than waiting for permission or approval. The old Eleanor would have spent weeks agonizing over these decisions, seeking consensus, worrying about hurting feelings or causing conflict. The new Eleanor, born in the quiet aftermath of a devastating birthday, moved with purpose and clarity, unafraid to claim her right to self-determination. By evening, when I finally called Daniel, I would be standing on solid ground, my future secured by my own hand. The conversation would be difficult. Emotions would run high. But the decisions had been made, the actions taken. For better or worse, I had stepped into the driver's seat of my own life, and there would be no turning back. The afternoon passed, in a blur of productivity. My meeting with Howard Brenner was thorough and reassuring. We established a living trust that would protect my assets and ensure they would be used exclusively for my care and well-being. Any remaining funds after my passing would go to a scholarship for aspiring teachers, not to Daniel. "Are you absolutely certain about this, Eleanor?" Howard had asked, his pen hovering over the paperwork. Disinheriting a child is a significant step. "I'm not disinheriting him out of spite," I explained. "I'm ensuring that my life's work goes towards something meaningful. Daniel has a good job, a good education that I helped provide. He doesn't need my money. He wants it. There's a difference." Howard had nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I've seen too many clients deplete their resources helping adult children who never learn to stand on their own feet. You're making a difficult but prudent decision." By 6 o'clock, I was back home, mentally and emotionally drained but fortified by the concrete steps I had taken. My house would be listed by the weekend. My new home at Oak Ridge Gardens would be ready in 3 weeks. My finances were secure. All that remained was to tell Daniel. I had just made myself a light dinner when the doorbell rang, an insistent, prolonged buzz that set my nerves on edge, Through the peephole, I saw Daniel standing on the porch, his posture rigid with tension. Beside him, Veronica waited with arms crossed, her expression a study in controlled impatience. For a moment, I considered not answering. I wasn't ready for this confrontation, had planned to have it by phone, with the buffer of distance to help maintain my composure. But they had seen my car in the driveway. They knew I was home. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door. "Mom." Daniel's relief quickly gave way to irritation. "Finally. Why haven't you been answering your phone? We've been trying to reach you all day." "I told you I had appointments. I was busy." I stepped aside to let them enter, noticing how they immediately moved into my living room as if they owned the space, Veronica settling onto the sofa with a dramatic sigh. Too busy to respond to a text? We were worried sick. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of Richard that it made my heart ache momentarily. "I'm sorry you were concerned. As you can see, I'm perfectly fine." I remained standing, unwilling to take a subordinate position in my own home. "Fine? You stormed out of our discussion last night, ignored our calls, and disappeared all day." "That's not fine. That's erratic behavior." Veronica nodded in agreement. "We're genuinely concerned, Eleanor. This kind of emotional reaction isn't healthy at your age. At my age, as if being 65 somehow diminished my right to feelings or decisive action. I felt a flicker of anger but kept my voice steady. "I appreciate your concern, but it's misplaced. I wasn't being emotional or erratic. I was taking time to consider your proposal and make some decisions of my own." Daniel's face brightened slightly. "Good. That's all we're asking for. Reasonable consideration of a family solution. We can work out the details together, find a compromise that works for everyone." "That's not what I meant," I said quietly. "I've made decisions about my future, but they don't align with the options you presented." Veronica leaned forward, suddenly alert. "What does that mean?" I took a seat in Richard's chair, gathering my strength. "It means I've decided to sell this house and move to Oak Ridge Gardens. I toured a unit today and put down a deposit. I'll be moving in 3 weeks." The silence that followed was profound. Daniel stared at me as if I'd started speaking in tongues. Veronica's eyes narrowed to calculating slits. "You can't be serious," Daniel finally managed. "That place costs a fortune. It would drain your savings in no time. I've reviewed my finances with my advisor. I can afford it comfortably, especially once the house sells." Veronica stood abruptly. "This is ridiculous. You're making a hasty decision out of pure spite. We offered you a chance to be part of your grandchild's life, and you're throwing it back in our faces." "No one is keeping me from being part of my grandchild's life except you two, with your ultimatums and conditions. I can visit, babysit occasionally, be a loving grandmother without surrendering my home or my savings." Daniel paced the room, agitation rolling off him in waves. "Mom, you're not thinking clearly. That place is for old people who need assistance. You don't need that yet. It's a waste of money. It's a community of active seniors with amenities I'll enjoy. An art studio, a library, social activities. Beautiful grounds for walking. It's not a nursing home, Daniel. It's a lifestyle choice." "A lifestyle choice?" His voice rose incredulously. "You're choosing fancy facilities over your own family, over your own grandchild?" The manipulation was so transparent it almost made me laugh. "I'm choosing independence and dignity. I'm choosing not to be someone's unpaid housekeeper or ATM. I'm choosing to use the resources I've earned to secure my own future rather than fund yours." Veronica's face darkened. "That's incredibly selfish. We're talking about family here. Your own son. Your flesh and blood." "Yes, my son," I agreed, looking directly at Daniel. "The son I raised alone after his father died. The son I put through college by working summers and weekends. The son who now looks at me and sees not a mother to be cherished, but a resource to be used." Daniel flinched as if I'd slapped him. "That's not fair. We're not trying to use you, aren't you?" You offered me two options: give up my home to become your live-in help, or liquidate my retirement savings to pay for the help you want. Neither option considered what I might need or want. Neither acknowledged that I've earned the right to enjoy the fruits of my labor. So, what are we supposed to do? Veronica demanded. Childcare in the city is astronomical. We can't afford it on our salaries alone. I looked at her expensive watch, her designer maternity clothes, the new car I'd glimpsed in the driveway. Perhaps you'll need to make some adjustments to your lifestyle, the way most new parents do. Perhaps you'll need to prioritize necessities over luxuries. This is unbelievable, she muttered. I told you she would be impossible, Daniel. Daniel had gone quiet, a dangerous stillness settling over him. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and cold. You've changed, Mom. The mother I knew would never turn her back on family. The accusation stung, but I refused to let it penetrate. The son I knew would never have viewed his mother as a convenience rather than a person. We've both changed, it seems. He looked around the living room, his gaze settling on the family photos that lined the mantel. Holidays, graduations, moments of shared joy now sepia-toned with time and distance. So that's it? You're really going through with this? Yes. The house goes on the market this weekend. Madeline Walsh is handling the listing. At the mention of the real estate agent, something shifted in Daniel's expression. Calculation replaced hurt. A rapid mental recalibration that sent a chill down my spine. The money from the house, that's part of my inheritance, you know. Dad always said this place would be mine someday. And there it was. The true concern laid bare at last. Your father said many things, Daniel. He also said you should respect your mother and make your own way in the world. I stood up, signaling that the conversation was coming to an end. The house is mine to sell. The proceeds are mine to use as I see fit. Veronica's voice cut in, sharp as a blade. You can't do this. There must be legal protections for children's inheritance. We'll contest it. I met her gaze steadily. You're welcome to try. However, I've spent the afternoon with my financial advisor, establishing a living trust that directs my assets to my care and, eventually, to a scholarship fund for future teachers. It's all quite legal and quite binding. Daniel's face went slack with shock, then hardened into something I barely recognized, a mask of cold fury and thwarted entitlement. A scholarship fund? You're giving away our money to strangers? Our money. The presumption took my breath away. It's my money. Daniel. Earned through decades of work, careful saving, and prudent investment. You have no claim to it while I'm alive, and I have every right to determine where it goes after I'm gone. This is outrageous, Veronica spat, grabbing her purse. You'll regret this, Eleanor. When you're old and alone, with no family to care for you, you'll remember this moment and wish you'd made a different choice. I thought of Oak Ridge Gardens, the friendly staff, the vibrant community, the beautiful apartment waiting for me. I thought of the art classes I planned to take, the book club I would join, the gardens I would tend. I don't think I will. I said quietly. Daniel's voice dropped to a threatening whisper. Is this really how you want things to be between us? Because if you go through with this, it changes everything. The implied threat hung in the air between us. This was the moment of ultimate pressure, the point at which I was supposed to crumble, to apologize, to backtrack in fear of losing my only child. Instead, I felt a curious sense of calm. It seems things changed long ago, Daniel. I'm just now acknowledging it. He stared at me for a long moment, disbelief warring with anger in his eyes. Then he turned and strode to the door, Veronica hurrying after him. This isn't over, he said, hand on the doorknob. You're making a huge mistake. The only mistake I made was in not recognizing my own worth sooner. I followed them to the door, maintaining my composure even as my heart raced. I'll always be your mother, Daniel. I'll always love you. But I won't be used or manipulated, not even by my own child. The door slammed behind them with enough force to rattle the family photos on the wall. Through the window, I watched them storm to their car, gesticulating wildly as they argued. The engine roared to life, tires squealing as they peeled away from the curb. I sank onto the sofa, legs suddenly weak with the aftermath of confrontation. I had expected anger, manipulation, guilt, all the tools Daniel had used effectively in the past to bend me to his will. What I hadn't expected was the visceral pain of seeing my